This episode of the Quizpopture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, listen to up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, or give us something to discuss in our new post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/Quizpopture. All right. Getting in the mood, doing our podcasting equivalent of like a vocal warm-up where I just talk in this voice and it puts me in an engaging is it engaging? Am I being engaging? I ran out of steam halfway through explaining what I was doing.
I hear you getting engaged.
Yeah, I'm getting engaged to being single for a little bit longer.
Oh, have you set a date?
Yeah, it's today. There was a whole ceremony and everything.
Did you invite all your friends?
No, it was just me.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, in a way.
Oh, ouch. Ouch, I'm a goucher.
Oh, okay.
That was a little reference.
Right.
Any Back to the Future, the animated series fans that are listening will recognize that as Doc Brown's catchphrase. Anyone who's a fan of the movies will not recognize that.
Yeah, would not recognize such a lazily written and horribly structured series of gibberish to be Doc Brown's catchphrase. Richard, I'd like to begin and you're running the show, so stop me if you want to do something different.
Okay.
But I'd like to begin our first Film Franchise Fortnights post James Bond. Our second franchise of 2020, because it took us so long to get through James Bond.
Yeah.
I'd like to begin with a little example of what a lot of the dialogue exchanges in the Expendables trilogy sound like.
Okay. Spoilers,
so,
we are covering the Expendables trilogy on Film Franchise Fortnights, which is what you're listening to on the Quizpopture podcast. Yeah. It's a podcast where every 2 weeks we watch and discuss a different film franchise.
And I'm AJ, and you are Richard.
Yes.
Okay, so Richard, here's how it goes. Can you say to me, in your like gruff, aged action hero impression, your best gruff, aged action hero impression, some kind of cliche action movie cool line? It can be anything that you've heard or approximately heard somewhere in any action movie.
It's just been revoked.
Yeah, it has just been revoked. That's what most of the dialogue exchanges in this trilogy sounds like. It's like written on paper. Yep, that's a cool line. All right, I'll say it to you. You say it back to me. And that's how a lot of it goes. So let's, with that indoctrination into this franchise, what are we doing, Richard?
What are we doing, AJ?
We're doing the Expendables trilogy.
Yeah, we are doing the Expendables trilogy.
Interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting.
I get it. You're doing the same thing to me. Oh,
I am doing the same thing to you.
You weren't doing a Bruce Willis impression, so I couldn't tell.
I wasn't doing a Bruce Willis impression.
So I couldn't tell.
Yeah, you couldn't. Do you reckon we could keep this going the whole podcast?
No,
if you hadn't pointed it out, people might not have noticed.
I think it would be horrible. That would be a horrible way to do things.
Yeah, it would be a horrible way to do it. Okay, so The Expendables is currently a trilogy, which means that it consists of 3 films. They came out in 2010, 2012, and 2014. And don't you just love when it's like a nice, neat year? We don't talk about like release dates very often.
No, we don't.
But I'm a big fan of when films come out 2 years apart.
It's a good... 1 year is too short.
Yeah.
10 years can be too long for some franchises. See Cats and Dogs. But yeah, 2 years is the minimum and often most appropriate amount of time to wait between sequels, I think. Unless it's like an event thing like Avengers, where it's like tune in next year to see what happens next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it gives the sense of like release one, see how well it does, make a second one. You have a year to make it, and then you release it the following year, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not just like Oh, they just fucking churned one. Like a lot of the horror movies we've covered,
Mm.
like, would go through a phase where it was like, the 3 years there was one a year, and it's like you're just fucking churning these out. And then like something like Cats and Dogs. Why are we waiting 10 years?
Yeah.
Waiting, twiddling our thumbs on the edge of our seat. Two things that do not go well together. One is when you're waiting idly. The other one is, so it's you're in the middle of the road right there. So The Expendables is it's a series of films about a group of aging mercenaries called The Expendables, led by Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
And the whole like hook of these films is that it's uniting for the first time these sort of 80s action stars, and the whole thing is intended to be a throwback to that. So having said that, what is the first film about, AJ? The first film being directed by Sylvester Stallone as well as written. He wrote all three.
So it's not really about anything too dense. It's about they've got a mission to do, and it gets a little bit personal. They've got to defeat a bad guy in a foreign country, and they do that.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
Yeah. So they go to a South American island to overthrow a dictator, and so he's interfering with the plans of this guy known as Mr. Church, who's Bruce Willis. And so he's the one that employs them essentially.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that the dictator is actually a puppet being controlled by a CIA officer, who is the real target of the hit. What did you think of this film?
So I thought, okay, there's a lot of stuff I really want to say out in front, and I'm just trying to figure out how to order it. I didn't like this. I thought this was a bad movie. Like, this was not... I didn't think the first one was fun in the way that even it's supposed to be fun. I thought it was vapid. I thought it was poorly put together. I thought it was boring and kind of cringy in parts. And these aren't my types of movies at the best of times. But I was on board to be like, cool, a dumb action movie. Let's go. It didn't live up. That's the first one, though.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. The first one, it's like, I mean, without going to, because it's like, especially the first one, I don't really have that much to say about, but how it relates to the other two, I do.
Yeah, sure.
So let's just go through all three films, and then we can talk about the franchise as a whole. So, Expendables 2 came out.
What does Expendables 1 have on Rotten Tomatoes?
Oh, so Expendables 1, what would you guess it has?
I would think it'd be sub 60.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like 40%?
42.
Yeah. All right.
64 with audience, though.
Yep.
So The Expendables 2, which came out 2 years later, now directed by Simon West. So Stallone stepped aside, and it's actually his first film in like 10 years.
Wow.
Where he's starring but hasn't directed it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And also, if you're interested, Simon West, he did like Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, When a Stranger Calls, just a bunch of shit. Oh, he did Con Air, was his first film.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So he's kind of one of those ones that he's been kind of coasting off that.
Yeah.
It seems. So anyway, what is Expendables 2 about?
Okay, so in this one, the main crux of it is like there's still... Do people don't want to know the object X that needs to be secured, do they? It's every bad guy X. The bad guy's played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and at the start of the film, they are hired to do the job to steal something, and the kind of crux of the film is that their protege, the Expendables' new protege, who's played by Liam Hemsworth, is that right?
Liam Hemsworth,
yep.
Yep.
He is killed in action by Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, and the remainder of the movie becomes sort of we have to finish the job as well as get payback on Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about plutonium and weapons-grade plutonium. And so, Liam Hemsworth, who's killed in a very Jean-Claude Van Damme way, where they, one of his henchmen lines up a knife with Liam Hemsworth's heart, and Jean-Claude Van Damme does his signature move, which is like a flying roundhouse kick, which drives the knife into his heart. And it's kind of badass, and it's also kind of sad.
Yeah.
So, briefly, what did you think of this film?
It's the best one of the three. It's just as stupid, but I had the amount of dumb fun with it that I was kind of expecting the first one would deliver.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, so the team has expanded in this film as well. We'll go into the team a bit later on. But Chuck Norris is introduced in this film. He came out of retirement to do this, and he even makes reference to the Chuck Norris facts,
which were all the rage in 2012.
Yeah, where they meet this character Lone Wolf, a reference to Lone Wolf McQuaid, which is a character Chuck Norris played. And they show up and they're like, "I thought you were dead," and he goes, "Yeah, I heard that too." And then so he's like the golden god amongst the Expendables.
Yeah.
That when he shows up, everyone's like, "Oh fuck, this is the guy." And then Stallone's like, "I heard you got bitten by a king cobra," and he's like, "Yeah, I did, but after 5 days of agonizing pain, the cobra died," which was apparently Stallone was like, "Oh, asked Chuck, can we put one of these in the script?" And Chuck Norris's wife chose that one because it's her favorite.
Nice. I think this movie really highlighted to me how Chuck Norris jokes really were like baby's first meme, huh? Like there's a Gen X comedy about Chuck Norris jokes that you wouldn't get with a more millennial sense of humor, and hearing it in this film,
like the Shaggy memes.
Yeah. Well, they're more. I'd fob them off onto the Zoomers as opposed to the millennials, because I want millennials to have the golden age of memes. But I don't know. Hearing the first Chuck Norris joke I've heard in 5 years really highlighted, like, man, these never really were that funny, were they? They're kind of like a very basic form. I don't know, not basic, I don't want to be mean, but it's like something the age between me and my dad would find funny, which is the generation that probably initially made memes.
I mean, I found Chuck Norris jokes funny.
I did too.
At the time.
At the time.
Like, they're a fun kind of, experiment.
Yeah.
Like, to come up with these things of just like, oh, imagine the most, like, badass person possible.
Sure.
And then just saying it's Chuck Norris for whatever reason, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is clearly the best film, I think. It's safe to say. And maybe the Rotten Tomatoes score, reflects that. Maybe it doesn't. What do you think?
Maybe like, so the first one's 42. I would actually still probably guess this one would only be about 50 or so.
Well, it's 68.
Okay, there you go. Nice. Yep.
Yeah. 67 with audiences, interestingly.
Means almost nothing.
Yeah, and this is also the only film from the trilogy not to be nominated or win any Razzie Awards.
Oh, cool.
The Golden Raspberries, which are, the Oscars for shit.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. And so let's move along to the third film, and we've got a very exciting thing here for the Cult Popture podcast. We've got actually Sylvester Stallone, here himself to explain the plot of the film. Do you want to take it away, Sly?
Oh my god, I thought you were going to play an audio clip or something. Okay, yeah, so it's sort of the same as the first film, but and the second film, but this time Mel Gibson is the main villain, and he's someone from Barney Ross's past, and he's like, hey, I'm Mel Gibson.
Oh, sorry.
Hey.
Sorry, hold there, Sly. I've actually just seen just behind you that Jason Statham has just walked in.
Hey, it's Jason Statham.
Jason, if you don't mind, can you do you want to finish the plot?
Okay. So after one of the original a much easier impression to do, I feel.
That's interesting because I don't think you're as good at it.
After Terry Crews' character is downed in action by Mel Gibson's character, Sylvester Stallone's character decides that he doesn't want to be responsible for the lives and deaths of all his fellow expendable mates. So instead of being responsible for these 45 to 70-year-old aging men, he recruits a bunch of 25 to 30-year-old men and women to go and enact revenge on Mel Gibson's character. I lost it towards the end, but...
yeah.
I never claimed.
Let's say towards the end.
I never claimed
I've
to be
heard you
good
do
at
a
these.
really good Statham before, and so I was like,
I can do
excited
one
to
line.
hear it,
I can do one line as Statham.
Yeah, do it. Explain the story and do
Okay,
the line.
it's from Crank, I think, or is it Crank 2? And he's like got the one up. He's one-upping a bad guy while he's on the phone to him, and the bad guy gets real mad, and Jason Statham goes, "Calm down, you little penis." And it's real funny to call someone a little penis, I think. Not imply they have
That
one.
actually wasn't even the line I was thinking
What
of.
were you thinking of? Oh, then we're making a movie, wasn't that? That's from the Crank 2 special features, which I've watched. It's when they get interrupted during filming, and he's like, "We're making a movie." It's so funny.
Anyway, so yeah, it's about the co-founder of the Expendables, Conrad Stonebanks, Mel Gibson's character. And he was presumed dead, and so this is like, it's one of those classic like, this is too big a deal, like, and so they have to recruit a new team and all this shit. But it's also very going by the Scream 3 rules of trilogies. That the second one upped all the action, and then the third one is like, take it back to your origin story and examine that.
I know what you mean. And can this dovetail into a talking point that I wanted to talk about?
No.
Absolutely not. It does have a lot of threequel ideas, but I also thought that in a way the team in crisis, they're like, I have to fire everybody and hire new recruits, it's too dangerous, we've got to end the Expendables, also feels very Spider-Man 2, like I'm giving up kind of thing,
right,
which is also very Toy Story 2, also very Chamber of Secrets. It's this kind of template that I've seen in a lot of second stories in a series. And the first Expendables movie, one of my main problems with the first Expendables movie, Richard, is that I feel like this kind of movie either needs to be an origin story, how they all came together, or it's hey, we haven't seen each other in 10 years, let's get back together for one final job. But it's none of those things. The first Expendables movies is just they do a mission, they're already established, they're still together by the end of it. Richard, all three of these movies are Expendables 2. They're all Expendables 2. They all feel better in my mind as being the second movie in a trilogy, and I was so like,
interesting.
And that's why the second one's the best, because it's also Expendables 2 and it's actually Expendables 2 in the plot.
Yeah, I think it's like the minor tweaks I would make to these films to make them to work as I would like them to as a trilogy is Expendables 1 is pulled back into action and recruiting the team, and it's like,
I haven't seen you in 10 goddamn years, you show up on my doorstep, and
yeah, the meta narrative as well as like, oh, Dolph Lundgren, you haven't been in a movie since the 90s, like, we're getting you back out of retirement kind of thing. So it's like, you've got that narrative to it, and then the rest of the movie is essentially the same, but you have that, and you also emphasize, because it's never really pointed out in any of these films, that like these guys are quite old.
What are they though? Because Sylvester Stallone's got to be 25 years older than Jason Statham, and they're like best friends.
Yeah, true.
Jason Statham, I would not think of as an age. I'd think of him as new school, like in terms of the actors, which is strange because it feels like antithetical to what the movie's thing is.
Yeah,
it feels like Jason Statham's character should be, I don't know, another 80s action hero I can't think of right at this moment.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like you're training his replacement kind of thing. Like maybe it starts off in Jason Statham's character Lee Christmas, is he's the new leader of the Expendables, but there's this like this old job. There's this other job that he has to like bring Stallone back out of retirement for. Like, Stallone's the man in the chair now. He's like the chief, the hand in your gun and your badge, and he's pulled back into the field because they need to. Whatever,
Which is sort of,
I'm sure.
Yeah, that's sort of what happens with, and let me see if I can get them all. Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris, Harrison Ford, Jet Li, kind of, over the course of the 3 movies. That's the role they all take. It's like man in the chair who's eventually pulled back into action.
Yeah. But and then Expendables 2 is more or less the same. It's like, oh, the team's back together now, but then they would disband at the end of 2, and then Expendables 3 would be like Sylvester Stallone. You have the thing of like, this fucking shipment was stolen or whatever, and he's like, I don't care, I'm out of the game. And then they like slam the photo down on his desk, and it's Mel Gibson's Conrad Stonebacks. And it's like, that son of a bitch, I thought he was dead.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I can't involve the old team in this. So then he goes and hires the new team, but then we still have that moment at the end where it's like, you thought you could do this without us?
Yeah.
Which is like, obviously they're going to come back in Expendables 3.
Yeah.
But if you kept that out of advertising or anything like that, it was like, the shitty kind of like, Sylvester Stallone assembles a new team. It's like, oh god, who cares? But then you'd have the cool epic finale where it's the original Expendables plus the new guys against.
Yeah, and
like so there is elements of what we're looking for, but they could just be a lot clearer.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that the reason the first film is just like the cut and paste mission without any substance surrounding it, I think it's because idealistically they're like, we want no fat on this movie, right? We just want it to be a shot of adrenaline. But this, I think the first Expendables movie really highlights why story stakes and personal stakes actually improve a film, even if you think they're for little babies, which I'm presuming is why they're not in this film. Like they I don't know, they make a film feel more lived in and the world feel better and the story more compelling, which is why the second one I think is the best. Not because it's written that way, it's just by virtue of it literally being the second one. It has enough backstory to supplement that.
Yeah. Well, just before we continue with analysing the trilogy as a whole, what do you think Expendables 3 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I did look, because I was checking the cast and saw the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Naughty boy.
Yeah, sorry.
What is it?
It's 30s, 30-something?
32.
Which is, it's better
32.
than the first one, I thought. So, I don't entirely agree with the ranking.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, these 3 movies, I find them so interesting because there's quite a few different ways to read them. And one reason as well, I should mention that I think the third one did so poorly, or is kind of the not so much loved one, is it's... I was trying to think of, in my head, I was like, I know there's a common expression to describe this thing, and I could not think of it. So I said the not so much loved one.
The black sheep?
Yeah, sure. If you want to be racist about it.
Okay.
But it's PG-13 rather than R-rated, and this franchise has had a little bit of a weird relationship with the R rating because the first one was like, yeah, fuck it, let's do like hard R, like just absolute, like you said, no fat. It's just like fucking guns, blood, and one-liners. And then the second one, they said they were thinking about making it PG-13, and it's often reported that it was like Chuck Norris, who's like quite religious and conservative and everything like that, didn't want to be in a film like that.
The coolest thing,
badass Chuck Norris.
Yeah, the coolest thing about Chuck Norris is he's a religious conservative. Yeah, fuck yeah, King Cobra died after biting him.
But that's potentially unsubstantiated. But so there's conflicting reports where like the director says, "No, it was always filmed as an R." Stallone said, "We looked at PG-13 at one point, and then decided against it." But the VFX supervisor has said that it was shot as a PG-13, and then when they got like the all clear to make it R, they added all the blood in post.
Right.
And so that's like it's like all this VFX,
'Cause
and there's like beheadings that weren't
Yeah.
shot; they were just done through VFX.
the violence does feel real inconsistent in these movies.
Yeah.
Like, they don't seem like they're R-rated on the surface, but then, like, the amount of gore in them is like, oh, yeah, I guess these are R-rated.
Actually, it's worth noting as well, and this was when I was because I did have somewhat of a good time with all three of these films actually, but like the first film opens with them rescuing a hostage, and so it's like you see there's this big dramatic reveal of the Expendables who are standing on a ledge pointing guns at the bad guys, and then it's one of those like, oh, you can't shoot me or I'm going to shoot the hostage. And then they just like shoot with a gigantic bullet, seemingly. The guy like in his belly essentially, and his like stomach and hips just explode, and the top half of him like goes flying backwards. And it's so over the top and so gory that I was like, this is the perfect introduction to what I understand these films are.
Yes. Which is, what do you think the target audience is for the Expendables?
Oh, it's repressed dads, right?
It's divorced biker dads, yeah? Like it's
Yeah.
they drive Harleys, they enjoy smoking cigars and playing with knives and guns with their friends. And watching the first one, I was very cynical about this because like it ends with like the boys are back in town, and like this piss poor poem by Jason Statham, which you're supposed to think is real clever, but it's not. It's just a poem that kind of rhymes. And I just thought it was laughable how aimed at that you know, the type of dad that has a man cave and wears leather jackets kind of thing. But I do want to say something before we get into making fun potentially of this demographic. While I find it cringy and while I do not relate to it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that type of person. I don't think there's anything that wrong with these films. They are not. There are a few things that you go like, I probably wouldn't say that to a woman half my age if I was in their position. But other than that, it's like,
dad, like these divorcee dads would.
yeah, exactly. But other than those things, it's like this is fine. It's not toxic masculinity. Okay. It's just dumb masculinity. Like it's not so that toxic.
I wanted to talk about this
after all the James Bond movies.
Yeah, exactly. I did want to talk about this because there was a question I had midway through the second film, I think, that I wanted to get your opinion on, which is like, should these films exist? Do these films warrant existing? Because they're for a very specific demographic, but at the same time, there's of course the argument that's like, there's every film is made for this demographic. Like it's just a straight white male power fantasy kind of thing.
It is a power fantasy. It really is.
Yeah, like it actually is. But yeah, do you think that these films shouldn't exist?
I think in a world of, I was going to say with Fast and Furious in the picture. Okay, if there is a triangle of the straight white male demographic, and on the top is the Expendables, then it's
straight, and
then it's Fast and Furious on one of the corners, and like James Bond, classic James Bond on the other corner. Right, I feel like that's sort of the dichotomy we're looking at because Expendables is trichotomy, I should say, triangle. Because the Expendables is it's straight white men, but it's specifically divorced dad in their late 50s straight white men, like have a barbecue with your mates. Whereas Fast and Furious is like boy racer kind of straight white men, then James Bond is like they weren't as tough as the biker dads, but they were still pretty slimy in there. The 1950s versions of like a nice guy complex, right?
yeah. So it's like if James Bond is for like the ones that are still repressed, and whereas like Expendables is for like midlife crisis.
Yeah, these are midlife crisis movies. I think that the Expendables has the least wrong with it. Does that make sense? I think it's the least problematic. Yeah, sure. Because it's just like, oh, whatever. These are just hobbies that people have.
That's the thing. It's like these fun, enjoyable films that's like, you're seeing... Because in my mind, I was like, I think it's really cool that these films exist.
Yeah.
That in the 2010s, all these like washed up actors got together and had like a one last hurrah, and they ended up doing well, and they'd made a couple more of them, kind of thing. Yeah, but then at the same time, it's like, I mean, I guess if you're saying like, I'm not saying these films should exist more than other ones that uh, representing minorities and things like that. But which I think is often the argument that it's like, well, why are we getting another Expendables movie instead of this or whatever?
Yeah, sure.
But it's like, they're a good time, and I think it's so clearly for a demographic that it's cool that that demographic has something so specifically tailored to them.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like a fun experiment of like, you're given a random person off the street and you say, make the perfect movie for this person. You get Expendables, depending on where you where you pick this person.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that if we're not going to have the conversation about how there needs to be more diversity in movies. If you take that very logical and fair conversation out, then there's nothing wrong with these movies. And I think in a lot of ways what you're saying is kind of why the first one is the weakest, because the first one was directed by Sylvester Stallone. What's he directed? What else has he directed?
So he directed all of the Rocky movies except for the first one, the fifth one, and Creed. Actually, I don't think he did Creed 2 either. He also did like the Rambo films. He's done a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Really. He did the sequel to Saturday Night Fever.
Because I feel like one of the reasons the first one is bad is because it's someone who's trying to balance their ego with, like, prioritize their ego over a bunch of other very big egos. And maybe the second ones are better because the director isn't on screen, so he's not having to satisfy himself.
Yeah, at the same time, I think Sylvester Stallone is, often seen as just like a dumb meathead kind of thing that doesn't get these kind of things, but he is actually a very intelligent person, and
I agree.
a very good writer.
I'm not here to argue. I actually agree with you, and I was trying to be tactful of how I worded because there's no reason to say Sylvester Stallone isn't a good storyteller, because he's proven he is. And I don't know what it is then about the Expendables 1, because I brought up the ego thing and the fact that there are other action stars in it that he's trying to direct as well. I brought that up because Expendables 1 is like one of the worst utilizations of an ensemble cast I think I've seen in a movie, right? Like, this is supposed to be the fucking Irishman of 80s action stars, right? Yeah. But you get a lot of Sylvester Stallone, you get a lot of Jason Statham, who's a 2000s action star, and then you get Terry Crews appears near the start of Expendables 1, then he's not in it for so long that when he comes back, you're like, oh yeah, Terry Crews is one of the Expendables. That's right.
Do you want to actually, the story behind that, and this is again what part of the like, I like Sylvester Stallone kind of thing, is that so Terry Crews had a very small role, essentially just what you see at the start, you don't see him again.
He comes at the end.
And so, so this is like his original role in the script was just like tiny part, essentially just like, oh look, we've got some new and some old kind of thing. And so I saw an interview with Terry Crews where he was talking about it, and he says, he was only on set for like 2 or 3 days kind of thing. He had just like this small part just to hit like 3 or 4 lines. And he was like, you know what? I'm working with Sylvester Stallone. Like, I've got all these guys around me, and this is such a great opportunity. I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to put like everything into this performance, even though it's just a handful of lines. And then, while shooting one of his scenes, Sylvester Stallone continued to update the script and gave Terry Crews a bigger role because he was doing such a good job, and he could see, like, how much care he was putting into even just the small part. And so that's why there's a scene where Terry Crews actually saves Sylvester Stallone's life, and that was written after the fact because he just had this great respect for what Terry Crews was doing. And when asked about like the casting as well, Stallone said that he was, he's been someone who's been on really hard times and was given a chance to make something. Like famously when Rocky came out, he had this like, the hottest script in Hollywood, but held on to it until he was allowed to star in it, which only like one studio let him do, kind of thing, and the rest is history. And so it was like these people that, because he was like living on the street, he was and he had no money in his pocket, kind of thing. But someone gave him a chance, and he was able to make it big. And so he said that so he's been in positions where someone's given him a break like that, and so he kind of wanted to rally together these people that maybe haven't worked in a while, that have fallen on hard times, and give them that again. So that's like Dolph Lundgren hadn't been in a movie for like 15 years, and so it's kind of cool that, and because also a lot of these guys famously had feuds in the 80s because they're all up for the same roles. Like I think Dolph Lundgren and Sylvester Stallone hated each other on the set of Rocky IV. Dolph Lundgren like broke his ribs and hospitalized him.
Oh my god.
Schwarzenegger and Stallone had a famous rivalry in the 80s as well, because they were up for like every single role. Stallone makes Rambo, and then Schwarzenegger makes Commando. And there's also, if you'll allow me, there's also a funny, famous story where there was this absolute fucking dog shit of a script floating around Hollywood, and Schwarzenegger read it, and because he said he wanted to be doing more comedies, and so his agent was like, oh, check out this script, and he was like, this is fucking horrendous, but he's like, leak it to Stallone that I want to star in it. And so they called Stallone's agent and said, oh, Arnie's looking at doing this film. And so Stallone's like, oh, well, if he's going to do it, and I'm going to take it first. And so that's why Stallone is in Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Our second franchise in a row to be tied to Stop or My Mum Will Shoot after James Bond, because Roger Spottiswoode, who I incorrectly called Robert Spottiswoode in the Daniel Craig episode, directed both Stop Him or My Mum Will Shoot and Tomorrow Never Dies. And Richard, is it time for midway through Useless Statistics? The
Poorly
return,
placed.
the return of a segment we did for a little while, maybe a year and a half ago, that one of our producers, Jeremy, told us that we weren't allowed to do anymore because it was boring. And then we mentioned it on our quiz episode last week. Overwhelming response from the fans saying bring back up top Useless Statistics, but we are about halfway through the episode, so I guess it's just this is where they end up. And so here are some fun idiosyncrasies between this franchise and previous franchises we've done. Yeah. These are statistics for the podcast, not for the movie.
Yeah.
That's where the word comes from. So this is also our second franchise in a row to feature a character whose first or last name is Christmas, and therefore makes way for plenty of little puns. Christmas Jones being from The World Is Not Enough, the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie, where they make jokes like, I thought Christmas only comes once a year. In Expendables, so Lee Christmas is Jason Statham's character. And there's a scene in Expendables 3, for example, where Antonio Banderas is sitting in the passenger seat, because he's also in this franchise, by the way. And Sylvester Stallone tells him to get out of the seat because Christmas is coming. And Antonio Banderas is like, but it's June, which is a little interesting insight into when the story takes place.
Yeah.
On Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone, this is also our second franchise where the third film in that franchise has Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone show up in. But in Spy Kids, Sylvester Stallone is only in the third one and not in the other two. And in The Expendables, Antonio Banderas is not in the first two and is in the third one.
And isn't this our third franchise where Antonio Banderas is in one of the sequels but not the first one?
It could be after SpongeBob and Shrek.
Yeah. It's also our third franchise total to use Christmas as a name after Lloyd Christmas and Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, so third... Oh my god! But they don't use puns in that one. It's relatively ignored. That's great. This is our...
We're just coming up with them now.
No, so okay. Depending on how interested people are, there's like the amount of actors that are in these movies. It's like there's gonna be a lot in them. So like we've done Arnold Schwarzenegger franchises with Jingle All the Way. We've done Jason Statham franchises with Fast and Furious, which Ronda Rousey is also in one of them. I feel like the glorious return of Up Top Useless Statistics is not what people were hoping it would be, because all I've got is, we've covered other franchises with these actors in it.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's we don't have to we don't have to do this. We don't have to just.
You don't have to do this.
But another fun segment that we sometimes do is dumb IMDb trivia.
Hell yeah!
So this was found on the. I've only got one. It was found on the first Expendables IMDb page. So apparently, the first Expendables is rumored to be the first installment of a trilogy of Expendables movies. So look forward to that.
Richard.
Yes.
Is Arnold Schwarzenegger a slut?
In real life? Because he cheated on his wife and got like the maid pregnant. And
that's true.
And now we have Patrick Schwarzenegger. No, that wasn't. Patty Schwartz wasn't that child, I don't think. But he did have a child with in an extramarital affair.
Because I feel like I have seen so many post-heyday Arnold Schwarzenegger movies where all he does is bark his famous catchphrases from previous films, right? In The Expendables, you've got at least 2 I'll be backs. You've got a get to the chopper. You've got a I lied. And those are just the ones I remember. I'm sure there's ones I just didn't pick up on.
Yeah, put that cookie down.
Imagine if he said put that cookie down.
Yeah, like everyone comes in and just quotes their less famous films. So actually, Arnold Schwarzenegger hadn't been in a film for a wee while, because this was around the time of his Governor of California thing.
His little phase.
Yeah. And then, so I think, the first one was his first film in 5 or 6 years or something like that. And then, this kind of brought him back out of retirement.
And he's not very good in them.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, is Arnold Schwarzenegger a good actor outside of Terminator, where he's playing like a...
Yeah. Joe found out a fun fact
slate
the other day about Terminator, which also relates to this film. But so when doing the the German dub for the Terminator, they wouldn't let Arnold Schwarzenegger use it, do it himself and record his own lines again in German, because his specific accent is like super redneck. Or like their equivalent of like trailer trash. And so over here, a German accent's like, fuck yeah, what a badass. But over there, it would be like, give me all your clothes and all your...
I'll be back!
So they had to get someone else to do the voice. And so with these dubs, they when you get the job, you're like assigned to that actor kind of thing, not just that character. So you dub that person in all of their films. And Stallone and Schwarzenegger have the same person, so they had to do 2 slightly different accents in German to make them sound different.
Wow. Well, while we're talking about what a bad actor one of the cast members of The Expendables is, could we... Okay, feel free to tinker with the parameters of the spectrum. On the spectrum of good actor to bad actor, I feel at best actor in the franchise, you've sadly got Mel Gibson. Not that I'm cautious to praise Mel Gibson these days, but my God, is he compelling in these movies.
Are you saying he's the best actor in the in these movies, or he's the best actor human being?
The best actor in these movies gives the best performance in the franchise. Yeah. Yes. I feel like middle is Jason Statham or Terry Crews. Like, perfectly serviceable, fun.
Well, so the thing about their characters is that they're just charismatic in real life, and that's just coming across to be playing these like charismatic characters,
Yeah, agreed. And at the end, you'd have, who would be at the end? Like Bruce Willis, at least in this movie. These days Bruce Willis would be around there. Who else would it be? Like Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
What's his name? Randy Couture.
Yeah.
the UFC fighter. He's so bad.
He's also he just stands out because there'll be all these like like more than once I had to look up who the other guy was because
Yeah.
he's one of the main. There's only 6 that are in every movie. Oh, plus Schwarzenegger as well, but he's not really an expendable.
No.
But it's Stallone, Statham, Jet Li, Dolph Lundgren, Randy Couture, and Terry Crews.
And you've heard of all of them except for Randy Couture.
And I had to, like, more than once, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Because you assume that he's just some 80s action star who's aged out of their, their look.
Yeah.
But no, that's just what he looks like.
He looks like Joe Rogan. He looks exactly like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's not very good either. Anyone who's more of a wrestler than an actor is it shows in these movies.
And like you said, Ronda Rousey's in this film because this takes place in that 2-year period where the studios really wanted to make Ronda Rousey like an actor, and she was an MMA fighter, and I remember what happened. Like I can't remember which order these happened in. So she retired from MMA to like do films, and then she did this and Furious 7 and like one other one. But she was supposedly cast in a remake of Roadhouse, as Roadhouse. And then these movies came out and they were like, oh god. And then she like got back into MMA and she like talked so much shit about her opponent, Nunez. I can't remember her first name. And it was literally like bell, ding ding, boom, kick to the face. She was knocked out. And that was Ronda Rousey's MMA career done because she just lost and was like, I didn't even like MMA. And then now does WWE, I think. But she also thinks that Sandy Hook was a government conspiracy. So
that's fun.
Because we were debating whether or not it was kosher to single out Ronda Rousey as being bad in these films when she's one of the only women given screen time. But I think that she's a bad person in real life makes up for that.
Which is fine to mention, but then I was like I messaged you today and was like, fuck, Mel Gibson's good at this than the third one. And I was like, does it then become sexist again to be like, Ronda Rousey shit, but it's okay because she's a bad person to be like, but Mel Gibson though, God, he's so good at his job that his heinous crimes are forgiven. his anti-Semitism I wiped clean because he gives a good performance in The Expendables 3. So that's at least all out of the table. Maybe we've got blind spots. I'm just saying, let us know if these are inappropriate things to praise or condemn.
So I do want to. We skipped over this really, but so how would you rank the films?
2, 3, 1.
Yeah, same. I like 2. I actually think 3 has kind of the most interesting story. Like 3 was the one where I was actually most invested in what was going on because Mel Gibson. In spite of his personal misgivings, he's very good in this film, and it's the personal stakes for Barney, Sylvester Stallone's character, just make the film more interesting. You have like someone who's essentially his equal in every way because they created this team together. Then someone that knows all the secrets, and it's like we saw this in Skyfall with Silver.
Yeah.
It's a common trait in. And villains, and especially in third films and franchises. But yeah, but then it is just one of those things where like, the second one is just better. But I could, if someone's favorite one was the third, I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, what the fuck?
Oh man, I would be so uninvested in that conversation that I wouldn't even say like. I wouldn't even tell them which one my favourite was. Yeah. Because despite having a favourite, I don't really want to watch these movies again. Yeah. These aren't making it into my Hall of Fame.
So just on the team, it's worth mentioning, because obviously these films star like fucking everyone. Some people that they tried to get, they asked or turned it down or couldn't get a hold of, whatever. John Travolta, Nicolas Cage, Robert De Niro, Taylor Lautner, Clint Eastwood, Dwayne Johnson, Mila Jovovich, Jackie Chan, Steven Seagal, Charlie
Yeah.
Sheen, Kurt Russell, Jack Nicholson, Tom Sizemore, Donnie Yen, Al Pacino, Ben Kingsley, and Ray Liotta.
A lot. See, okay, here's the thing. I mentioned that it's trying to be the Irishman of 80s action movies before. But I think by the third one, it stops being about trying to get action movie stars and just trying to get movie stars. Kelsey Grammer is in the third one. He has a huge
He won a Razzie
role
for his performance as well.
Oh man, it's so weird to get Kelsey Grammer because it's like, that's right, this time we've got Mel Gibson, who, yeah, sure, he was in enough action movies to he wasn't exclusively action, but I can understand. Then it's like Harrison Ford, and it's like, okay, yeah, no, again, like he's been in his fair share of action movie roles. Then Kelsey Grammer, okay,
He was Beast.
he was Beast. He was Beast.
Yeah, well, so it is worth mentioning Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Ben Kingsley, and Ray Liotta were looked at for Eric Roberts' role in the first film, which is clearly where they went for someone who's more about bringing prestige as an actor.
Of course,
than,
yeah.
And Taylor Lautner was looked at for Liam Hemsworth's role.
Of course, which good decisions on both counts, I think. Because Taylor Lautner is a terrible actor and Liam Hemsworth is a good actor. But also because Ben Kingsley, no, sorry, what's his name? Ben Roberts. No, what's his name?
Eric Roberts.
Eric Roberts being in the same movie as Dolph Lundgren reminded me of one of the strangest little things in Hollywood, which is these two very different shaped men look the same. Dolph Lundgren and Eric Roberts look like the same person, but one is massive and one is small. do you agree, or is that just some weird thing?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Dolph Lundgren, I enjoyed him, and I thought he was good.
Oh, you just wait. We've got some prime Dolph Lundgren franchises coming up at some point.
Oh, okay.
Well, just the one. So before we move on to our segments, there's just one thing that I want to know if you picked up on it. But what did you think of the LGBT representation in these films?
I did not pick up on it.
Okay, so there's a moment...
I almost felt like I was being aggressively told not to pick up on anything that could be construed as gay in these movies.
Okay, well, so there's a moment at the end of the third one when they're all at the bar celebrating, and then Jet Li and Arnold Schwarzenegger's characters are like, they're ribbon Sylvester Stallone a little bit, and then they kind of laugh and giggle, and Jet Li rests his head on Schwarzenegger's pec, and Stallone says, "You guys want to get a room?" And then they giggle together and say, "You're just jealous." Now, to me, I was like, "Wow, is this like actually?" And so I googled it. It is I know I've spoken out against this on the pod, but Word of God canon from the director states that they are a gay couple.
Aww, cute.
And it's like I thought it was obvious enough in the film, and LGBT representation I don't think needs to be like, oh, we're gonna go be gay together. You don't have to outright say it, but there's very clearly something going on there. And the way Sylvester Stallone says, "You guys want to get a room," it's not as in like, "Oh, cut out that gay shit in my bar." It's like, it's like, "Oh, you too," So, I fully bought that. And I was like, this is a really interesting development in these films. It's the last thing I would expect in these films.
The divorced biker dads won't be as progressive as Sly Stallone, though. So,
yeah.
I thought the most palpable sexual tension in the franchise was between Jason Statham and Wesley Snipes in Expendables 3, because they sort of start out as like both battling to be Sly Stallone's right-hand man, and then at the end they kind of like impress each other enough to earn each other's respect because they're both knife guys. Wesley Snipes' character refers to himself as the knife before Christmas at one stage. That's fun pun.
Fantastic.
And the scene in the bar after they've killed Mel Gibson and everything's all good, they each throw a knife at a dartboard while looking at each other in the eyes. and they both hit the bullseye, and they're just so close to each other, Richard. It was kind of sexy. Also, in the first film, Sylvester Stallone says very sexy at one point. So we've officially had our catchphrase said in one of the franchises we've watched. I'll try find a soundbite of it. I'll put it in here where Sly Stallone says very sexy if I can find it.
We need a soundboard, and just that's the only button programmed on it.
Yeah, sexy, right? Very sexy.
So, continue the franchise. So, there's 3 to 4 sequels at various stages of development. Now, after we finished recording last week and we got the Expendables, I told you not to look up what is planned for this franchise because I was like, this is the most insane thing I've ever read. However, having watched the movies, it's not that insane. So there's a sequel coming out, a spin-off / sequel supposed to come out in December next year called The Expendables: A Christmas Story. And I was like, how fucking ridiculous is it that of all movies, they're doing a Christmas, but then, of course, it's actually a spin-off focused on Jason Statham's character, Lee Christmas. And so it was like halfway through the first movie, I was like, oh, fuck, that'll be it.
See, the thing is that still does sound like a film we would come up with during our what we did at Christmas time last year.
Christmas the franchise.
Yeah, franchises that need a Christmas special. That feels like that's what it should be. That's a good idea, and I would love more Jason Statham solo.
Yeah,
movies.
This is our second franchise that either has or is planning to have a spin-off centered around Jason Statham's character.
After Fast and Furious, of course. Yeah. Nice.
So there's also an Expendables 4, which is supposedly happening. Pierce Brosnan has expressed interest or said he's in talks to be in it. Stallone has said that he wants Jack Nicholson to play the villain.
You know who needs to play the villain in an Expendables sequel?
Who?
Keanu Reeves. It's only a matter of time. It's like, if I would bet on anything, it's that Keanu Reeves will be in a future Expendables movie if they're still making them.
Yeah.
Which it feels like they're not, because they haven't been for 5 years.
So Stallone, in 2017, Sylvester Stallone pulled out of the film.
Oh.
Due to problems behind the scenes. He then later returned and confirmed that was happening and that he was involved. Terry Crews has pulled out of the film because I don't know if you're familiar or how familiar you are with his sexual assault case. Where he was the victim of sexual assault by
a producer. I
can't remember his name, but or like an agent. And so he got a call. He says this in his testimony. You can watch it online. That the producer of Expendables 4 essentially said, "We can make things easy for you or difficult for you, depending on whether or not you drop your case." Because Sylvester Stallone's agent is the guy that he is suing.
Oh man, this is what has made the Expendables series more problematic. Then it's more rotten behind the scenes than in the text of the film itself. That's really sad. Because to me that's an indictment on Stallone as well. Yeah, that's sad.
Okay, so Stallone is no longer represented by Adam Vennett because he retired. So also
so there's potentially good blood there.
Yeah, potentially. And Jason Statham said he would return, essentially saying, it's a fucking dream to work alongside Stallone, and I grew up watching his movies, and now to be written and directed by him is a dream come true, and I'll do anything he wants me to do.
Concerning pledge after what we just heard.
In March of this year, it was confirmed by Randy Couture that the script was finished in 2019, and also Hulk Hogan claims to be in it.
That makes sense.
Potentially the most interesting sequel or whatever planned or at some point planned is the Expendables. This is the all-female reboot. So in October of 2012, the plans for an all-female reboot were announced. The following year, is it a
reboot or a spin-off?
It's unclear at this point.
Right.
But entered early negotiations with Meryl Streep, Cameron Diaz, and Mila Jovovich to star.
Jesus
and apparently,
Christ. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
It's such a different pedigree of actor. They are not the equivalent to like Stallone.
So they said they were looking for a female director. And then by February 2014, Robert Lukatic had been hired as the director. The director of Legally Blonde.
Oh.
So Stallone said he's not involved with it, but he would like to see Sigourney Weaver in it. And then everyone was like, just cast her in a fucking Expendables movie. But it was
that's a good point.
It is a good point, but at the same time, it was like, do you have anything to do with this? Nah. Okay, who do you want to see? I don't know, fucking Sigourney Weaver. Like, it's very like, why would you ask a follow-up question? I said I don't care.
Sigourney Weaver and Linda Hamilton would have to be the equivalents. Yeah,
exactly.
To Stallone and Schwarzenegger and stuff.
So, the official synopsis for the film. The Expendables universe has a new team. An elite group of highly trained female mercenaries are brought together for a covert hostage rescue mission. Once they are behind enemy lines, the women discover that they will need to topple an evil dictator bent on world domination. It becomes clear there is no such thing as the right man for the job. The Expendables is the ultimate story of female empowerment and kick-ass teamwork. So all studios involved intend production to begin early 2015. There has been no movement on the film. However, it was leaked that the covert hostage rescue mission involves them going to like a brothel and posing as high-class call girls. The ultimate female empowerment mission.
Yeah. It's never ultimate female empowerment when you put that in the log line, is it?
Yeah. But it's like, that's such like a man's idea of, all right, what are women like doing? Yeah.
Dressing up as sex workers, yeah!
So, I didn't actually know about this until just before. I knew about the other ones, but, so on February 1st, 2020, so not that long ago, Sylvester Stallone, Chuck Dixon, and YouTuber Richard C. Meyer started an Indiegogo campaign for a graphic novel titled The Expendables Go to Hell. It will be published through the Splato Comics label and feature Barney Ross, Lee Christmas, Gunnar Jensen, Yin Yang, and Toll Road fighting a supernatural war after they're killed in combat.
Yeah, I wouldn't make that into a movie.
Yeah, but it's
a graphic novel.
Dig that as a graphic novel.
Yeah. All right.
So that reached its goal and it is coming out.
Cool.
My Continue the Franchise, it was supposed to tie in directly to what I was talking about before I said this, but it's now been like 5 minutes. But I would love to see a spin-off centered around Trench and Yin Yang, which is Schwarzenegger and Jet Li's characters. And, just like a wholesome little, like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but with these two characters.
Even if it wasn't about them being gay, there would still be an interesting physical.
No, it has to be that they're gay.
Of course it does. But just Jet Li and Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting is an interesting concept.
Yeah, because they're such different styles of combat as well.
Yeah.
Like it's what one is very precise, the other one is just a giant hulking mass.
Imagine if this gets made and it's like in 10 years it's considered like a pillar of queer cinema.
And then it'll be like, podcaster Alexander Jones tried to remove the gay subplot from Trench and Yang.
I wish I didn't word it that way. I didn't even need to mention that. I could have just said, oh, that those two would be an interesting fight. But instead I was like, maybe if it was still straight.
All right, what's your Continue the Franchise?
Okay, so this is just Expendables 4. This is just an idea for Expendables 4.
Cool.
Which, if we can briefly talk about titles, they're not really expendable, are they?
When one of them does die, they're like, no, God!
And they're not working for anyone, so they're expendable to who? Anyway, sorry, that was a point I wanted to bring up earlier on. You know what I mean?
Actually, they are working. It's revealed in the third film that they're actually like the original Suicide Squad kind of thing, because they actually hired, the original team anyway was like hired by the CIA, so they would go into these these kind of dark places, like the South American island where there's some evil dictator. They go there, they massacre everyone, so the CIA can come in and just like arrest the guy without having to do any of the dirty work. Which is actually that was kind of a cool reveal, I thought.
would have been good if we knew that in the first one to justify the title. Anyway, okay. My idea is mainly for the villain of Expendables 4 should be someone our age, Richard, a 26-year-old,
Overweight.
No, not well. He could be, I guess, but like a Mark Zuckerberg type, like a smart guy, right? Like a computers guy, essentially the polar opposite to a 80s action hero, right? Like a nerdy young, more brains than brawn. Because I'd really like to see. Almost get another writer on board as well for that character specifically, and write a villain that is kind of looks at the Expendables the way that you and I look at the Expendables, right? It's like this kind of like joke of a crew of like, oh, big tough guys, yeah, but you don't hug each other, but you don't express your emotions to each other, like all of this really condescending stuff, but kill him. Like, he dies in the end, right? Absolutely. That's part of the ethos of Expendables is that if this is the correct way to be a man, sick dude, I'm down. Put me on screen, a character like me on screen as the villain and fucking snuff me. You know what I mean? Like, do that. Like, have it take ages for them to get into a actual fight with him because he's too, hands off. So he's like sending drones or whatever. But when it's just him and Stallone in a room, it's like one punch and his head explodes, right? Like
cry.
Yeah, exactly. I would love that. I would find that so funny to have like me being represented on screen and then I'm murdered by the previous male ideal. Absolutely. That's how you make that. I don't know. I just thought that'd be a fun way to represent both types, as well as to be like, you know, the older demographic getting a one-up on the younger demographic in a fun, pulpy way that everyone can enjoy.
Nice. I like it. All right, so we've only got one proper segment now, which is a new one this year. It's called Rank Dat Franchise. Where we take Dat franchise and we rank it. We made a ranking. If you want to hear the whole thing, have a listen to our ranking the first 99 franchises podcast from last year. And so we're going to place it in here somewhere. If you're wondering about this list as well, there's something we refer to as the nymphomaniac constant, which is if essentially it's the middle of the list in terms of quality, because Nymphomaniac Volume 1 is one of the best films we've watched for this podcast, whereas Nymphomaniac Volume 2 was awful. And so they completely cancel each other out. And so if a franchise is more good than bad, it goes above. If it's more bad than good, it goes below. So, The Expendables. First off, does it go above or below Nymphomaniac?
I think it goes below it.
I think it goes above it.
Okay, what's your reasoning?
Okay, so looking at the films that are just above Nymphomaniac, we've got High School Musical, Spy Kids, and American Werewolf in London. Well, I mean, okay, mainly High School Musical and Spy Kids. Both of those movies are about that they have trilogies of roughly the same quality, but then they have a fourth film that's significantly worse, and they still manage to be above. So I think that I think this trilogy, like the first one, is fine. I didn't really care for it that much, but I had quite a good time with the second and third one. So I would say it's actually a bit more good than bad. But
that's a good reasoning.
It's not great.
Yeah, that's the thing. I would say, like, even at the best of times, I still wouldn't consider these good movies. But they achieved their purpose. So I agree. I think So put it above, what? Spy Kids? One above Spy Kids?
Yep. So is it worse than An American Werewolf in London?
Yes.
All right. It's number 40 now.
Sweet, there you go. And Richard, for our next franchise, for the next fortnight that we're going to be watching, this week it is a Patreon-decided franchise. We're over at patreon.com/quizpopture. If you chuck in $1, holy shit, that's such a small amount of money. If you chuck in $1 a month, you get to suggest and vote on which every second franchise we cover, as well as several other perks of being on the Patreon. So our next franchise with the winning vote is from Jensen, and it is the Mighty Ducks trilogy. So over the next 2 weeks, you and I are going to be knee-deep in hockey movies.
Logging into our Disney Plus, our shared Disney Plus account.
Yeah.
And because they're all three of them are on Disney Plus. If you want to watch along at home.
So the Mighty Ducks trilogy, something I feel just as out of touch with as 80s action movie stars. Like now I'm watching like 90s sport movies. What a fun podcast this is. It takes us to such interesting places. Have you ever seen them? I've never seen them.
No, I haven't. It's interesting with these movies where there's obviously a lot of nostalgia for them for some people, but not for me.
No.
Not for me. I think
So
I might have seen the first one or parts of it on TV at least.
Prepare for an objective,
Yeah.
potentially scathing, depending how good they are,
Yeah.
review of the Mighty Ducks trilogy.
Yeah.
And other than that, guys, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to it on all platforms. We're on Acast, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. We've also got videos on YouTube and video essays and things like that. Give us a like on Facebook, follow on Instagram and Twitter. Email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. Let us know what your favourite 80s action movie is and why The Expendables is actually the best franchise we've ever covered. Why is it number one?
Yeah. And then tell us why your wife left you.
And how you regret introducing your 15-year-old son to weed at such a young age.
Also, AJ and I are going to be making appearances on a couple of podcasts soon. So we'll let you know when those are available. But we both did episodes of Pop Culturally Deprived, which is Matthew... I'm not going to say his last name because I mispronounce it, and Mandy. And so we covered films that one of them hasn't seen, and then we're also going to be doing Mike No Yeses podcast.
Random Acts of Cinema, where we're going to be talking about An Angel at My Table. Not often we get to talk about Criterion films, but I welcome the opportunity. So thank you so much, guys. Oh my God, Richard. Oh my God. Chuck Norris has just burst into the room.
Oh my God.
Chuck, no! I'm sorry what I said about you! Oh no! Oh God! Oh God! Oh God!
Oh my gosh. I don't know about you, but I'm standing up right now, giving a standing ovation, because what an episode.
I can't hear you're clapping.
Yeah. You can't hear my clapping, or you can't hear me because of how loud my clapping is.
The second one. Welcome along, everybody, to the post-credit scene, the Patreon post-credit scene, where if you donate more than $5 over at patreon.com/cultpopture, then you can give us a little thing to talk about at the end of each episode. And today's Patreon post-credit scene comes to us from Lucas Mayo, who is my flatmate, aka Pickle Darling. That's right, it's officially canon that two F-grade Christchurch celebrities live with each other. There you go.
Wow.
I can.
You're in Pickle Darling's band, aren't you?
No, that's a misconception. So Lucas asks, what's your favorite movie soundtrack or score? Mine would be specifically the track In a Heartbeat from 28 Days Later. It's such a pumping, fun, scary score, and I really love it. That was the first score I ever really remember falling in love with. In terms of soundtrack, I always really liked the Watchmen soundtrack. It's real like strange and like such a strange selection of songs for that movie. It's got like Simon and Garfunkel and 99 Red Balloons.
The My Chemical Romance cover of Desolation Row.
Exactly.
Fuck, man.
Yeah.
What a good song.
What about you?
As for me, this is one of those ones where it's like I know there's going to be ones that I don't think of. But scores I really like Halloween is a classic. I've got that on vinyl, and I've got the remakes one on the 2018 version on vinyl as well. I really like Contagion's got a real cool score. Actually, one of my favorite movie soundtracks would be Your Name that we covered on Patreon recently.
Nice.
It's obviously originally in Japanese, but they re-recorded the songs in it because they did like the score and they did some songs of it as well. Because it's like he got like a pop punk band to do the soundtrack, and they re-recorded the songs in English, and all of them were in my top 10 most played on Spotify last year.
Nice. I also really like the Lost soundtrack by Michael Giacchino. I used to hoon that. Yeah, I think that's probably where the extent. Actually, you know what? The Last of Us score is beautiful. Video games, not movies. The Last of Us score is amazing.
Lego Marvel Superheroes.
Lego Marvel Superheroes has because I watched you play this. It has a sort of idle soundtrack, like the music the score, sorry. There's the music that plays when you're not doing anything and you're just kind of wandering around the city is so somber and peaceful and a little bit sad and a little bit melancholy. And I remember listening to it just be like, this music is so not suited to a Lego game, you know?
Like it belongs in The Last of Us.
Yeah. Go listen to that's the takeaway for this post-credit scene. Go listen to the Lego Marvel Superheroes soundtrack.
Yeah.